Hello, hi, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. I welcome all the participants and the presenter to the session Innovative Tools for Awareness Raising and Decision Making. This is Elma Mosheda from Asian Development Bank. I work as an urban development specialist in South Asia department. I've been with ADB for last 11 years and working in urban sector, including water supply, sanitation, and waste management. So today we have, in this session, we have 4 presentations. Just to give you a bit of a background, our first presentation would be on the early detection of disease spread and surveillance. The second one would be on the effective partnership for improving operational efficiency for water supply and sanitation. Third one would be on the using of real-time data for water supply sanitation services. And the fourth one would be improving resilience in urban water supply sanitation service for the secondary cities of Asia. So, I mean, as you, based on all this presentation, I feel that it is really an important session because we have different kinds of technologies, options, and processes available in this sector, but it's really important that we understand them and we are aware about them, and then we use them efficiently in our decision-making process. So, and then also, I think that the takeaway that we would, the takeaway from this session would be like how the lessons from this COVID-19 pandemic and other external shocks can be used to improve the water supply and sanitation sector. Just after this, okay, and this is just a background of the session. And now I would like to thank Josephine Adu-Gamfi. Probably I'm pronouncing the name right. He will be working as the rapporteur for this session. He's a water supply and sanitation engineer for Community Water and Sanitation Agency. I would like to request all the audiences to go to the chat box and put your questions and comments, and then we'll address them after all the sessions, if that is okay with you. Now I would like to invite, we can start our presentations now, and I would like to invite the first presenter, Mr. Arthur Kokolikos, for the, who will be presenting on wastewater epidemiology for all. His presentation would be on the wastewater epidemiology for all. Arthur has over 30 years of experience in the role of services, sales, application and product management, especially in the municipal and industrial sectors in his home country of Australia and the wider Asia Pacific region. His passions are finding solutions to customer problems that delivers value of their processes and operations. In his current role as Business Development Manager at Lumin Ultra Technologies, Arthur is educating the Asia-Pacific market on the cost and damages associated with microbial threats in industries and in the community as a whole. So Arthur, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that excellent introduction, Elma. And welcome to all the attendees in the presentation today. We might get started straight away and getting to some level setting with definitions. So, SARS-CoV-2. This is the virus that causes the respiratory disease called coronavirus disease 19, that are known as COVID-19. And likewise, COVID-19 is an infectious disease caused by the SARS-CoV-2 virus. Epidemiology is a method used to find the causes of health outcomes and diseases in populations. In epidemiology, the patient is the community and the individuals are viewed collectively. Wastewater epidemiology involves testing and analysing wastewater samples to determine the consumption of or exposure to chemical substances or pathogens, in this case, SARS-CoV-2 within a population. This data can help inform public health services with decision-making by identifying exposure to toxic agents or prevalence of a disease within a community. So how can wastewater epidemiology be used? The COVID-19 virus is shed in human waste and creates a combined viral load in influent wastewater. That's the water that flows from homes and offices to sewage treatment plants and watersheds. Samples of this influent wastewater are tested for the presence of SARS-CoV-2 pathogens. This information enables public health to identify areas of, or communities with infections. Importantly, even in asymptomatic and pre-symptomatic carriers. So why would we employ this methodology? First and foremost, it's a well-recognised method of detection and is also non-invasive. Despite being relatively new, there are tremendous amounts of research papers on this methodology and subject. Importantly, it employs the same gold standard PCR methodology as in the clinical testing most are familiar with. But this testing is optimised for the complex wastewater samples. In simplicity, it is a surveillance tool without the need for testing people as we know in the main, individually and clinically. The biggest value of this data is as an early warning tool, as it has shown many times over through research and used to predict outbreaks up to 14 days before being seen in clinical testing results. Let's now look at the status of SARS-CoV-2 wastewater surveillance in the Asia-Pacific region. This graphic here is from the UC Merced researchers' website that shows a global map of SARS-CoV-2 wastewater testing. Compared with the regions of North America and Europe, we can clearly see here very low adoption in the Asia-Pacific region. So why such a low adoption rate? Here are 4 potential reasons. The very high capital cost for testing equipment, plus ancillary equipment to support the testing. Additionally, high OPEX costs of test kits and the challenges of a fragmented and stressed supply chain. There's a requirement for highly trained and skilled users to perform the testing and interpreting the results. These are typically centralised testing models where the testing is performed in laboratories. Our organisation, as our goal, is to help communities live, work and play in safer environments. In October 2020, we commercialised, after rapid R&D, a complete, rapid and on-site COVID-19 wastewater testing solution, overcoming the limitations in the previous slide. These include low capital costs for testing equipment, plus little ancillary equipment required to support the testing. Low test kit costs with all required components complete straight out of the box. Options for OPEX models supplied to reduce upfront capital expenditure. Less skill requirements to perform the testing, software to simplify testing and result interpretation, plus portability of test equipment, allowing the option for mobile and decentralised testing models. And equally as important, the equipment is suitable for other environmental microbial testing, like Legionella and E. coli for maximising return on investment. What are the typical use cases today? These include small communities, neighbourhoods in large cities, university dorms and housing, hospitals, aircraft and airports, cruise ships, and even mining camps. Some of the commonalities here, both individually and collectively, are transient communities, high-risk areas, but all with the ability to suffer high losses, whether that be on a commercial economic basis or through costs and stresses to health services. On the journey of testing developments compared with other things we measure in the environment, we're still at the beginning. Continued R&D from the beginnings in 2020 have already yielded a number of advancements. These include test reagent improvements to eliminate the need for refrigerated storage and ancillary equipment, the improved sensitivity for lowering the detection limits of portable testing solutions, considerably lower costs, both capital and operational, and improved viral SARS-CoV-2 RNA capture through simple, low-cost, innovative passive sampling. From the beginning of the pandemic to now, we've already learned many lessons I'd like to share with you. The first is do something or do nothing. Make a decision on your strategy without procrastinating. Assess the value or otherwise of wastewater epidemiology for your needs and act. For sampling, usually not enough focus is put into the sampling and overlooked as a priority compared to the end result. Achieving the best quality data for the end result is highly dependent on your sampling processes and locations. Focus on standard operating procedures. You should have a good plan at the beginning for the what next question, especially when data shows cases rising. This should almost be the first step of any wastewater surveillance program. With wastewater-based epidemiology, know that wastewater surveillance for the virus is just one piece of the puzzle in an overall holistic approach to protect communities. There's no silver bullet yet, and wastewater-based epidemiology is not it. For getting the biggest value out of this testing, it's surprising how many requests for assistance I've received when cases are high. The best value of wastewater surveillance is when cases are low. Our guard tends to be down, and typically there's less community clinical testing. I've included some COVID case numbers from a couple of countries in the region. For me, this demonstrates two things. In the first top case, thinking it won't happen in your community may be an optimistic view. And secondly, thinking we've passed the worst of it may also be optimistic. The second bottom graph is a representation of cases as we've seen globally. I also wonder what effect wastewater surveillance might have had in these instances if it were employed as one of the tools. So to conclude, some final messages. The future look, well, this will be automated testing, minimising and ultimately eliminating the requirement for human intervention. But this is a medium to longer term solution. Here's my simplistic view on SARS-CoV-2 wastewater-based epidemiology. This is your smoke alarm warning, giving you the opportunity to act days before the fire takes hold. And lastly, I look to the future by looking at the past. The picture here is at an airport where a thermal camera was deployed at the time of the 2002-2004 SARS outbreak. This technology and tool is still in place today, 20 years later. So thank you again to all who've taken their valuable time out for my presentation. I trust I've been able to provoke some thoughts and provide some insight. Thank you also to the presenters and the organisers.
Thank you, Arthur. Now we have our second presentation. It's Miss Kate Trevor, and she would be presenting the adaptive partnering during the pandemic lesson and successes. Miss Kate, floor is yours. Now you can present. Thank you.
Thank you, Elma. Thank you for the introduction. I'd like to begin my presentation today on International Day of the World's Indigenous People by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land in Australia from where I am joining, the Gadigal and Bidjigal people, and recognise their deep connection to our precious waters and land. I'd also like to pay my respect to elders past and present and acknowledge any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining us online today. Next slide, please. For those of you not familiar with AWA, we are Australia's biggest water network, inspiring and driving a sustainable water future. We share knowledge, connect people with purpose, and inspire positive change. Our network's extensive. We have more than 5,000 individual members and 500 corporate members, which allows us to engage with one of Australia's broadest professional audiences. Our international program at AWA has developed over the past 8 years and provides a platform to connect the supply of Australian water knowledge, technology and expertise with the demand for this internationally. Our aspiration is to be an integral partner to the Australian government in water, connecting Australian expertise with the needed opportunity overseas to drive a sustainable water future for all. Next slide, please. So it's an honour to be part of this year's Asia Water Forum to present on adaptive partnering during the pandemic. To explore this topic, I'd like to share with you a case study which focuses on the delivery of a 3-year water utility twinning program and highlight our adaptive partnering approach that enabled the program to flex during the pandemic. The Indonesia-Australia Water Utility Improvement Program was designed and delivered by AWA with support from the Australian Water Partnership and delivery partner PPAMSI. The program involved 2 Indonesian water utilities, known as PDAMs, and 1 wastewater utility, PDPAL, and 3 Australian water utilities. The program objectives were to deliver a twinning program that strengthens the performance, accountability, and transparency of the Indonesian utilities to improve water quality and reliability, improve operational efficiency, improve financial sustainability, and improve organisational policies and strategies to be inclusive of gender equality, disability, and social inclusion. Next slide, please. And if you just hit next. Yeah. So the program commenced in late 2018, and the initial stages involved careful selection of suitable utility partners for the program, considering the needs of the Indonesian utility with the technical skills and knowledge available to be supplied by the Australian utility. Introductions were facilitated by AWA and PPAMSI in May 2019 at Australia's largest water event, AusWater 19, where the participating utilities met face-to-face for the first time, and the Indonesia-Australia WUP was officially launched with a signing ceremony and a series of workshops. Action plans were then developed and finalised by each utility partnership, following the Australian utilities' diagnostic visit to their Indonesian partners in July and August 2019. The purpose of this first visit was to better understand the condition of each asset, capacity constraints, and to obtain data to support monitoring and evaluation efforts. The action plans that were developed focused on knowledge sharing and capacity building around technical, financial, and operational goals, including improved safety planning and water quality management, improved asset management performance, and strengthening of GENSI awareness. These key areas, prioritised by the utilities, took forward key water reform objectives of the Government of Indonesia in its efforts to achieve SDG 6. The initial program was proposed to conclude at the end of 2020 and planned for numerous trips between Indonesia and Australian utilities, as well as the meeting at key water events in Indonesia and Australia. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, all travel ceased in March 2020, and the knowledge sharing and capacity building between the twins shifted online. The program timeline was also extended for a further 12 months to enable the utilities to focus on responding to the pandemic and to not lose the work achieved by the partners pre-pandemic. Next slide, please. So how did the program flex during the pandemic? AWA, with strong support from PPAMC and the Australian Water Partnership, was quick to pivot all knowledge sharing and capacity building activities online to ensure that our partners were still able to achieve improvements in water quality and reliability, operational efficiency, GEDC, and financial sustainability. The planned activities and implementation of the action plans that were developed were significantly affected, and it was key to allow the program to adapt to the new pandemic environment. This included expanding the focus of the operators to responding to the impacts of COVID-19. Building on the existing knowledge sharing platforms, which were established for the Water Utility Improvement Program, AWA and PPAMC facilitated activities to connect Australian utility experts and Indonesian water practitioners to share experiences and resources to aid in the response to and recovery from COVID-19. This knowledge sharing stretched beyond the 6 participating water utilities involved in the program, and through PPAMC's extensive networks, the resources and online webinars reached over 360 PDAMs in Indonesia. Through utilising existing social media platforms and the websites of PPAMC and AWA, we were able to increase access to technical technical advice, guidance material, and tools provided from the Australian utilities. Next slide, please. So despite all the challenges that were faced during the pandemic, our partners' ability to adapt to the new program environment helped achieve some incredible overall program outcomes, including improved quality of water supply and wastewater management service delivery of the 3 Indonesian utilities, which serviced over 4.8 million customers of Surabaya, Jakarta, and Bali. This included the completion of HAZOP analyses and improved chlorine residual. Improved utility operational efficiency, which included significant reductions in non-revenue water and installation of SCADA systems. Improved financial and asset management, which included certification to ISO 55000, development of integrated information systems, and implementation of asset management systems. Organisational policies and strategies that are now inclusive of gender equality and social inclusion, including support for vulnerable customers, understanding of employee demographics, female staff rotations into technical roles working in the field and management positions, toilets for disabled staff and customers, nursing rooms for mothers, and focus on fostering young water professionals. And the improved capacity of the Indonesian Water Supply Association, PPAMC, to deliver professional development services to the members. And finally, the sustained operations and performance of the utilities during the COVID-19 pandemic. This included online meter reading, work from home policies, and contract tracing systems for staff, contractors, and customers. Next slide, please. So the role of the in-country connectors and facilitators was critical to the program's success and was particularly crucial during the pandemic, where strong leadership and greater effort was required to continue engaging the participating utilities. Forging partnerships and involving the In-Country Water Association enabled sector-wide knowledge sharing and capability uplift beyond the utilities involved in the program. It also accelerated building trust, improving communication, aiding risk management and issue resolution, and enabling more efficient in-country coordination. The ability to pivot the entire program so quickly is a testament to the solid partnership between AWA and PPAMC, the strong commitment and friendships formed by each matched Australian and Indonesian utility, and the importance and demand for Australian expertise to be shared with the Indonesian utilities. And the silver lining of the pandemic was the opportunity to share strategies and tools to help water operators respond to, manage, and recover from the impacts of COVID-19. Next slide, please. So what do we learn about adaptive partnering through the Indonesian-Australian Water Utility Improvement Program? The first lesson is that adaptive partnering creates a great platform for the achievement of outcomes, even in changing and challenging circumstances. Focusing on the why is critical to the success of the program rather than focusing on the how and the what. Lesson number 2 was the importance of taking time to build relationships and establish trust. This is crucial to the program and requires time and constant communication and active listening. Building relationships and partnerships on the basis of respect and friendship opens the door for the sharing of technical knowledge, skills, and tools transfer, and then to have more culturally challenging conversations around gender equity, disability, and social inclusion. And finally, even though knowledge transfer can occur virtually, face-to-face site visits and study tours can't be forgotten, as they accelerate building trust and friendship and enable faster understanding of constraints, opportunities, and risks. Next slide, please. So I'll conclude there. I'd like to say a special thank you to the Australian Water Partnership for their ongoing support and for allowing flexibility within the program to ensure outcomes could still be achieved despite the challenges faced during the pandemic. I'll be around to take any questions at the end of this session, or feel free to get in touch via phone, email, or LinkedIn to continue the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Maybe I should have given a bit of background of Kate before the session, which I didn't, but just for your information again, she is working with international and as international and industry program manager at Australia Water Association. So, and he is working as a program manager, and she has significant experience in designing and developing and implementing a diverse range of programs and projects to drive an organizational strategy and goals. So yes, our next presenter would be Miss Donna Rina Patricia Tajora, and she will be presenting on contactless location-based billing and collection system using state-of-the-art cloud technologies. Donna Rina was previously the project manager for billing system. She is currently the business development manager of GeoNobel Institute. So, Donna, yes.
Thanks, Elma.
The floor is yours to present. Thank you.
Thank you, Elma. All right. So good afternoon, everyone. This afternoon, I will be presenting the contactless location-based, or we call it GIS-based, Geographic Information System-based billing and collection system using state-of-the-art cloud technology. So this presentation actually aims to highlight the application of location-based or GIS-based contactless technologies in providing water and essential services to water agencies or by water agencies, using, of course, the most recent technology on trend using cloud-based technology, particularly focusing on, of course, billing and collection aspect. We all know billing and collection in some part of most of the organizations, it's the heart of the organizations. So in the past few years back, particularly in the past 2 years, we have seen different companies and organizations, of course, that we're forced to shut down due to many different reasons. Here in the Philippines, being in the Philippine water industry for quite a few years already, we have observed personally, being in the utility industry, we have observed different utility companies or water organizations and agencies actually acquire great losses or big losses due to different reasons. They might not be shut down entirely, but they have acquired a lot of losses due to failure to probably collect revenues in a monthly basis, or probably due to inability to operate fully for at least a month. That's based on experience of our partners in the water industry. This is basically due to the issues and protocols by during COVID-19 pandemic in the past 2 years. So as a system provider, being in a company that provides a system to different water industries, we can see that these are all accounted to insufficient resources, possibly caused by probably existing manual systems in the organizations. So in the current Philippine setup, majority of our water districts still uses probably 2 or more systems, subsystems, inside one organization, located in-house as well. So meaning when say in-house, it cannot be without you or without the users located in the office, they cannot perform any task at all already. Unlike if you are cloud-based technology, you can perform your tasks and duties and responsibilities in and outside of your office, even you're working from home. So that's what we are actually promoting in this particular presentation. So from the current system, manual tradition system that is being the majority of the water district uses, like for example, for in the engineering department inside an organization, water utility organization, they still uses manual AutoCAD layouts to do asset management and decision-making purposes. For the commercial department, they still uses manual meter reading at field, and they can only transfer this data from field if they go back to office, and transfer to a different system again, and which is the finance to be prepared for collection purposes from the customer payments. So we are actually promoting digitization, computerization, and basically automation of all of these process workflows inside an organization or water districts remotely. So later on, I will show you some samples here in the Philippines, how they uses it. So our system is actually promotes as well a customized access to live data. Being a cloud technology or having a cloud technology, it enables the users, all of the users, from the field personnel to the meter readers, the office personnel, both areas or all locations, as long as you're the users of the system, you have uncustomized access to live data. So these are all real-time data, real-time monitoring of all the transactions currently happening on field or in the office. So what we basically do is we create a very powerful system, sole or single platform for everyone, all the users in the water district, to have them input their data, digitize data, like in the form of, we digitize all the data, let's say for the engineering, we also computerize all the meter reading and automatically transfer all this data from one system to another, in just within one system. So what we do, we process all this data according to approved process workflows as well by the district, and we do the analysis in the back end automatically according to approved functionalities or approved logic required by the water district or water agencies. And of course, by the end of the day, and then by the end of the month, and even by the end of the year, given all this data inputted or encoded by different users in the system in a real-time basis, due to these processes and with all these analyses done, we will be automatically producing all these reports right away, since all the data are already encoded in the system in a real-time basis. So one of the leading water districts here in the Philippines that has been currently using our system for 5 years now, so it's Bayawan Water District. So here I would just like to show you very quickly how they use our system. How this is the process of their meter reading on field using this modern application of cloud technology. So I'm displaying here the application that the meter readers use in the field to collect the readings. And here I'm also displaying the actual system that is being accessed in the office. But it can be accessed anytime, anywhere. Since it's a cloud-based technology, it can be accessed remotely. So it's very useful during the pandemic, since everybody is working in a skeletal schedule. So others are also working from home. So using this system, they can actually continue their task, perform the task at home. So once the meter reader enter the reading, like what you can see here, let's say, for example, for demo purposes, Juan de la Cruz account of a concessionaire, it will automatically be transferred or synced using the cloud technology to the system that can be accessed in the field, so that the collectors or the tellers can actually already receive without waiting for the meter reader to go back to office and transfer this data to their current system. As well as you can see, the concessionaire or the customer already received their bills via text messages in their phones. We have also applied contactless payment here, where the customers can already select, have different payment methods to select to in order to pay remotely in the comfort of their home, in the comfort of their homes. We have here different payment methods. After payment, all the concessionaires do not need to go to office or to the office of the water district to do the payment face-to-face. And it will automatically as well sync to the system. So the water district or water agency can just perform report generation by the end of the day, end of the month, or end of the year. So some of the other functionalities that we are actually promoting, this system can actually give you a holistic approach of the actual system by giving you the calendar, what to do, process workflows, work order calendar monitoring remotely as well, and of course, reportorial requirements of the water district to report generation, automatic report generation, available for exporting and printing, and of course, remote monitoring of all field workers anytime and anywhere by the management. This is actually used by the water utility agencies currently, especially during the past 2 years, to actually perform all their duties at task. Right. I think that's it. Thank you. If you have some questions for me later on, I'll be very glad to answer all of those questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. And then I would request the participants to put your questions in the chat box. I was checking the chat box, yes. So our last presenter would be Dr. Ramon Abracosa. He is working with ADB, with our City Development Initiative Asia. In fact, he's one of the staff working on this City Development Initiative Asia of ADB. I mean, managing that, working, supporting different cities and different agencies to develop project to City Development Initiative Asia. Today, his presentation would be project preparation for resilient urban water and sanitation services in secondary cities of Asia and Pacific. Ramon's expertise areas are civil and environmental engineering, urban infrastructure development, climate change management, and land and water resource management. He has over 3 decades of work experience. He currently serves as the program manager for the ADB managed CDIA Trust Fund and as urban development and climate resilience expert for the multi-donor Urban Climate Change Resilience Trust Fund, also managed by ADB. He is also an adjunct professor at the Asian Institute of Management. He holds a master's degree with specialization in infrastructure planning and a PhD degree with specialization in resource planning and management, both under the Civil Engineering Department of Stanford University. So Ramon, please, yes, the floor is yours to present. Thank you.
Thank you, Elma, for that generous introduction, and greetings, everyone. Happy to be part of this forum and today to share with you the work that Cities Development Initiative for Asia, CDIA, is doing to promote resilient cities. And in this discussion, we focus on water and sanitation applications. So the next slide, please. I'd like to start with just a quick background on what CDIA does. And then I'll move on to explain to you the toolkit that we are using and sharpening still, and show you some use cases and how we apply this toolkit, the framework and methods. And finally, some takeaways from what we're learning out of this application of resilience to cities. So CDIA has been around since 2007. And in 2018, it became an ADB managed multi-donor trust fund. Before that, it was an independent entity jointly managed by ADB and GIZ. So CDIA works closely with secondary cities. We develop project studies that translate city aspirations into tangible, meaning bankable infrastructure projects. And our supporters have ranged from Austria, European Union, France, Germany, United Kingdom, Rockefeller Foundation, and of course the Urban Climate Change Resilience Trust Fund. We provide grants of up to $500,000 US to cover the cost of a project preparation. And we do about 10 of these projects in any given year. So far, we have worked with 128 cities in 22 countries and have mobilized more than 100 million in grants for project development and capacity building. And throughout the process, developed 114 projects, studies, which have been linked to more than 12 billion in investments. Next slide, please. So we help cities identify their development priorities and then work with them to develop this into bankable projects. In other words, the technical viability and linking the project to actual implementation finance. In the process, we also help the cities develop their capability in urban planning, as well as in monitoring and evaluating the results of their development activities. And it's very important for us to emphasize that we are a demand-driven project development facility. We don't come with a specific agenda already, but we work with cities to define what they need and develop the projects with them over a course of, say, 8 or 9 months. Next slide, please. This is our typical project cycle. And you see, we start with project scoping in the upper left, and then we work with cities to develop the application and prepare the terms of reference that we then use to engage consultants. So we have a broad portfolio, and we don't prescribe specific tools. Rather, we work with consultants to tell them what framework we apply and how best they can contribute to that thinking by using the best and most practical methods for planning. We then mobilize them and go through the usual project inception, interim, and completion. And very important at the last step, we work with the funder so that the result of the project preparation is something that can be more easily translated to an investment loan. This process takes, all in all, anywhere a minimum of 8 months up to 1 year. And again, we are focusing on the bankability, not just doing pre-feasibility or feasibility studies. Next slide, please. So I'd like to tell you something about the work that we're doing on resilience. This is a thrust that we are aiming to strengthen, show more work on in the coming 5 years. We are starting on a strategy for 2023 to 2027, and climate resilience is an area of work that we would like to put more attention to, as that is also the demand that we're getting from our partner cities and the interest of our development financing partners. Next slide, please. This gives you a sense of our portfolio, and it's quite broad. We have many multi-sectoral projects. We are doing a lot of work on urban transport, social infra, like housing, for example, but also a lot that is water related, including flood and drainage management, water supply, wastewater management, as well as solid waste management as that relates to flood mitigation. And we have quite a good balance of the resources that we put to mitigation and adaptation. You see that on the left side of the screen, and on the right, you see how we spread our mitigation and adaptation related work across these different sectors. Next slide, please. And in terms of how we are impacting on climate change, it's important for us that we do the work that really has measurable and demonstrable impact on mitigating climate change impacts. And this is from the work over the last 5 years, of which we have completed more than 30 projects and have linked this to about 3.8 billion in finance. And so 48% of those projects have looked at exposure to climate change, meaning addressing that exposure, 52% increasing capacity to adapt to climate change, and third in this chart, you see 39% in avoiding greenhouse gas emissions. I won't take you through all in the list, but just to say that part of our toolkit is making sure that we develop projects with measurable and tangible outcomes that we can actually track to show the effectiveness of this of our approach. Next slide, please. And this is the framework, and this is in fact what I wanted to spend more time on. And this is something that we look to strengthening more, applying more in the coming 5 years of our new strategy. And you have here 4 elements. And that is, we look to resilience beyond just infrastructure resilience, which is the common understanding of resilience, building stronger engineering works. But beyond that, we look to combining that with ecological resilience, ecosystem resilience as well, very important, people's resilience and institutional resilience, and finally, financial resilience. And you look, you will see here that we have drawn a box around infrastructure and ecological resilience, because we don't see these as competing solutions, but rather we look to them as complementary, hybrid solutions, if you like. Where in infrastructure resilience, we make sure that the engineering works are climate-proofed, but beyond that, we look to services of nature to increase the natural capacity to deal with, say, floods, and enhance that balance between gray and green infrastructure. In social and institutional resilience, meaning we don't just look at the resilience of the physical assets, we look at the resilience of the people that use them, as well as the institutions that manage them. And financially, is a new area, well, relatively, that we look to being part of the solution set, unless we can generate financing for this kind of approach, more holistic approach, it will be difficult to push this very far. And by financial resilience, I would like to say also that in the next 5 years, CDI is looking to tapping more of private sector financing. And to do that through a blended financing modality, we don't leave public sector financing, rather we combine that with private sector financing in synergistic ways. Next slide, please. And our tools and methods are tailored to these 4, if you like, pillars or dimensions of holistic climate resilience. On infrastructure, we apply risk assessment tools, climate models. We aim to adjust design parameters in engineering so that they reflect the best of what science can tell us in terms of future climate risks and the uncertainty. Stress test the design so that these are robust to future uncertainties and range of climate change. On ecological resilience, this means that we are enlarging the perspective of planning. Instead of just the site of the infrastructure, we look at its ecological setting, upstream, downstream. And for that, because we have a larger footprint, we need to use tools like GIS, Earth observation systems, hydrodynamic and hydrologic modeling, so that we can better see how risks can propagate through that system and not just limited to our specific project. And in social and institutional resilience, we apply already what's available at ADB. ADB has a very strong safeguard mechanism, and we don't look at climate resilience as some kind of a safeguard. No, climate resilience to us is part of the development package. Development contributes to resilience, but some resilience measures might create maladaptations, and for that we need to be on the lookout. And so the safeguard system of ADB is very much useful to us, including guidelines for gender responsiveness, inclusivity, as well as disaster preparedness for vulnerable communities, especially the poor. And finally, in financial resilience, this is really the more challenging part, because bringing in ecological resilience and these other dimensions of resilience into the usual project packaging, which is focused on the physical assets, can result in the project looking more expensive. Meaning, because this ecological resilience and social measures may be seen as simply adding cost, adding value that cannot be translated to price, to monetary terms. And so that when the conventional benefit cost analysis is applied, we might end up in this holistic framework with a less attractive looking project. And so we are changing that by applying more holistic approach as well in financial analysis. Value for money, where we define value beyond price. We know value includes the value of nature as a natural protection against climate change. And very importantly, how we quantify these co-benefits so that they can be factored in decision making. Next slide, please. Just quickly, some use cases. Recently in Vietnam, we applied this thinking where we say, okay, the problem is the threat of increased flooding due to climate change. And the usual thinking is that, okay, then we increase the heights of the embankments along the rivers. But the project team thought this need to be thought through, and some ways that the natural river can be maintained so that it's able to discharge this water naturally, and that we are able to develop also a roadmap for the city so that they can combine engineering solutions with nature protection that, by the way, benefit livelihoods as well as tourism, so that we create a solution set that at the end of the day can be more attractive than just focusing on the engineering aspects of increasing the heights of embankment. So this has been a good example of marrying physical and ecological solutions for climate resilience. Next slide, please. That one, the example I showed you earlier, was investment ready, meaning from our work, it could be taken by the funding agency, negotiate with the government for a loan to implement it. This example is the other kind of work that we do, more upstream. This is looking at the bigger problem and identifying different approaches, more on a pre-feasibility level study, like this one that we did in Cambodia, in Battambang, Kampot, and Krachi, and Chilong, where many cross-cutting recommendations were presented to the local authorities, ranging from restoration of ecosystems to reduce climate risk, restoration of riparian vegetation, and a second option was implementation of flood prevention related aspects, including solid waste management. So looking at it in a broader way, how we address problems, in this case, flooding, and again, integrating spatial planning with climate adaptation related interventions, both in physical and ecological terms, both engineering and ecological. I think I have one more example before I wrap up. One more example, please. Next slide. And this is the one we did recently, are doing still in Chattogram, Bangladesh. This is a feasibility study for combined sewerage and fecal sludge management facilities, where again, we look to engaging with communities to see what they need and providing engineering and construction works that were adjusted for climate change impact, the elevations of the STPs in relation to projected climate change translated to flood levels through hydrodynamic modeling. I won't speak very much on this, but that is again an example of how we climate-proof, if you like, our engineering solutions, as well as engage communities to identify what they need and what they can sustain over the long term, as with the local government. And finally, my takeaways. Next slide, please. just a summary that we find from this, and we look to seeing more of this perhaps in the coming 5 years when we sharpen this toolkit and learn from it in collaboration with our other partners like UCCRTF, that proactive work that is done early in the stages of project development is important. That is that climate concerns need to be thought up early. It's not an add-on. It's not a safeguard. It's not just about tweaking the designs to somehow incrementally strengthen its structural integrity. No, it's more looking at the development package itself as part of the resilience solution. But that can only progress if the stakeholders understand it very importantly while they are conceptualizing the project. So we carry out climate diagnostics and discuss findings with our client cities. And for this, we need tools that are really fast. We don't have time to tell the city government that, well, to explain to you the risk that you're facing here, we need 3 months to develop. No, we are looking to really ready to go solutions, platforms that can give us information that is ready, made for diagnostics and dialogue with city stakeholders. And of course, we need a multidisciplinary team, people who can produce the dots, but also strategic-minded teams that can connect the dots so that we have holistic solutions that can actually work both on the technical side as well as on the financing side. And yeah, finally, a sort of holistic approach that combines infra resilience. We know that. That's what we have been doing mostly. But now marrying it with nature positive solutions and enhanced social and financial capacity. And we would like to say, avoid this, avoid an incremental approach. The climate proofing approach is fine, that's needed, but incremental is not enough. It has to be more holistic and well-rounded. And it's always not useful to introduce climate resilience midway through a project, by way maybe, or a safeguard. It's important also, but it's something that needs to be thought through and aspired to by project stakeholders right at the very beginning of a project. And yeah, last slide, please. We'll give you a download link to a book that we have published recently and describes this framework that I talked about and use cases, many more that you will find in this reference. So if you just scan the QR code in the lower right-hand side, we're very pleased to share this toolkit, if you like, reference with you. And happy to discuss in the Q&A. And thank you so much. I exceeded my time. I hope this has been useful. Nevertheless, back to you, Elma. Thank you all.
Thank you, Ramon. Our last presenter would be Dr. Jonathan Sheets, Environmental Engineer CDM Smith, and his presentation will be on wastewater surveillance, lesson learned from for proactive response to outbreaks. Dr. Jonathan.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak about wastewater surveillance. We're going to discuss this from the framework of program management and provide some lessons learned that we've applied throughout the COVID-19 pandemic and hopefully be able to use those for building programs out for future outbreaks. Next slide, please. So wastewater surveillance has come a long way since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. It was really a university lab-based system prior to. There are several high-profile examples such as polio and others. But when the pandemic kicked off in early 2020, it caused a springboard into the use of these tools for monitoring SARS-CoV-2 in wastewater. So in spring 2020, there was a clear proof of concept in university labs throughout the globe. Quickly thereafter, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention here in the US started establishing the National Wastewater Surveillance System, which was officially launched in autumn of 2020. Here in the US, it gained real mainstream media attention in the spring of 2021, just as vaccines were being rolled out in our country. And then as of spring of 2022, the WHO has now offered interim guidance for the use of wastewater surveillance to help complement public health efforts for battling the pandemic. Next slide. This slide describes that growth that I was just talking about. In March of 2020, there were less than 10 countries that were applying these tools to help combat the global outbreak. And then you can see as of June of this year, there are programs throughout the world. They're mostly concentrated in the United States and Europe, as you can see by the figure at the bottom, which I believe Asia, there's a significant opportunity to expand this field to help combat this disease and future diseases. Next slide, please. So we have broken this down, trying to simplify the steps to program implementation in approximately 6 distinct steps. So first and foremost, I'll talk about each of these in detail, but first and foremost, we need to engage with public health agencies. Typically, they are the users of these data so that they can perform actions to help combat the spread of the virus. Number 2, which is equally as important, is the establishment of the approach and objectives. As you'll see through some of the examples that I discuss, it's very important to balance this against the different sampling locations, as well as what the wastewater surveillance data can tell you. Steps 3 through 5 are essentially execution of the work. Once you've established your approach and objectives, you need to go out there into the sewer systems, collect the wastewater samples from the various locations. And then within the laboratory, there are a couple steps which include pre-treatment and concentration of the sample, followed by extraction of nucleic acids, which is what we're looking at in terms of tracking the virus. And then finally, number 6, which is critically important, is how to interpret these data and then incorporate those into public health surveillance. And I'll offer a couple examples of how we've done that in the past as we've developed these programs. Next slide, please. So I cannot describe how important it is to engage with the end users of these data. Typically, the end user and funding sources for this work come from a department or ministry of public health. These are the folks who are in the field combating the pandemic on a daily basis, and they need this wastewater data to be actionable for the work that they're doing. It needs to be a complementary tool to help them provide clear guidance to the general public. These public health ministries are typically located in cities which typically own the assets, which include sewer systems as well as wastewater treatment plants. And then where we fall in is in the middle. We have significant infrastructure experience as well as experience with things like GIS analysis, hydraulic modeling, as well as the sample collection, data interpretation, and working with the laboratories. And the way that our programs have worked in the past is we subcontract with laboratories that can do the analysis, and we help provide guidance through our knowledge of infrastructure to the departments of public health such that they can better understand the data. The departments of public health are while they were first born out of looking at sewage and trying to mitigate public health issues through the development of sewer systems, over time it has become a separate entity where they're focused more on epidemiology related tasks. So it is important to use our knowledge of infrastructure and wastewater systems, as well as the knowledge of the laboratory field to help guide them. You can see some of the collaborators that we've worked with in the past, including the Kingdom of Jordan, Egypt. We've also worked on the national level a little bit with the WHO and the CDC. Most of our work has been focused at the state level, though, in the United States, particularly in Massachusetts, Michigan, and Louisiana here in the States. And as the end users of these data are typically local departments of public health and local public health agencies, it is important to work with those local entities. Next slide, please. I can't state how important it is to establish approach and objectives up front in order to improve the cost effectiveness of the programs that are developed. So public health goals are often items such as social vulnerability, whether or not they want to monitor urban or rural populations. Often it is important for geographic coverage across the area of interest, as well as population distribution, such as different age groups. And also define success factors. This is really important as public health agencies get funding for this type of work. It is important for them to show that the work that they're doing is helping mitigate the pandemic. So another important aspect is these goals have to be made in concert with the scale of sampling. And that's important because each of the different places where you sample wastewater provide different types of data. So if you're looking at monitoring a city, for example, in terms of the overall large scale pandemic related changes, you'll want to monitor at wastewater treatment plants. If you're interested in specific neighborhoods, it's important to look at manholes. And then if you're interested in smaller populations such as buildings, it's important to monitor at cleanouts and places like that. And all of those provide different sets of data, which provide different use cases as shown in the chart in the bottom left. Next slide, please. I can't describe how important it is to understand sampling methods as well. Grab samples are typically much easier and cost effective to do. And we found that this is often the approach needed in areas where there are less funding available, whereas composite samples provide a better look at the representation of a specific sample because it collects small grab samples over a period of say 24 hours. However, composite samplers are much more expensive and require more labor as shown in the picture on the right. So it's important to understand the pros and cons of sampling methods as you're developing your program. Next slide, please. I won't touch on the details of the concentration and extraction methods that occur in the lab. But the big overview is that there are pros and cons to the concentration and RNA extraction methods that are selected. If your goal is really high throughput and you're not as worried about things like your recovery efficiency, you may want to use more automated type concentration and RNA extraction techniques. If you're really concerned about getting high recovery efficiencies, which is really important for some types of outbreaks, then you'll want to focus on those type of methods. So another component that's important is whether or not these techniques are applicable to future pathogens. And we really need to consider supply chains. We've noticed that during the course of the COVID-19 pandemic, that certain methods require consumables that were unavailable at certain times. So it's important to be adaptable, but consistency is very important for when analyzing the data. Next slide, please. And then we'll touch on the details with nucleic acid quantification as well, but right now there are basically two types of methods. There's the quantitative PCR and the digital PCR. Digital PCR can be broken down into was dPCR and then ddPCR, which is the droplet digital PCR. qPCR is a little bit older technique. There are more developed assays, but it has some issues such as needing to have standard curve maintained. It is cheaper, but it appears over the last several months that most labs are moving towards the use of digital techniques, either being dPCR or droplet digital PCR, because of lower detection limits and ease for moving towards new pathogens, as well as mitigation of inhibitor impacts on the development of concentrations. Next slide, please. And I'll just briefly talk about a small scale case study that we have done. We worked for a small community. We saw that there was a rapid uptick in wastewater data that allowed our public health experts to provide vaccines to that specific location. We were then able to sequence the samples to show that it was one of the earlier variants, such as the Beta and California variants. If you click quickly there on the slide deck, we were able to help mitigate an outbreak in a small community with the use of these data. Next slide, please. And finally, these recommendations for program implementation. Again, it's critical to collaborate early and often with public health agencies. Look at the goals, apply the goals with the use cases for wastewater surveillance. Please do not underestimate logistical constraints. It's been a critical issue in continuing to measure data throughout the course of the pandemic. It is also important to engage with contractors who have wastewater infrastructure and analytical experience. There are often folks who are really good at one or the other, but I must say our firm is very well equipped for understanding both the infrastructure needs as well as what the data we get in the analytical labs. And something that is also very underestimated is the need for tools for rapid data integration interpretation. These data are only useful if you can get them to the folks that need it in time. So we've developed a solution called EpiCast, which you can see there, which allows us to pull in data from both sampling data as well as analytical data, and then rapidly provide the data to the folks that need it as quick as possible. And I'm happy to discuss any of these applications further in the Q&A or afterwards. Feel free to reach out for more questions. Thank you again for the opportunity to discuss wastewater surveillance and CDM Smith's role.
Thank you, John. Let's move to the Q&A session. So there are few questions. So maybe I'll just through them, and then maybe the presenters can reply. For Kate, there is a question: what were the key factors for success in the water operators partnership supported by AWA with Indonesian utilities? That's for Kate. And with that, Kate, could you just can you just touch up on that? Then I had a few questions for Kate as well regarding, you can also answer with it, like how do you evaluate such partnership, and what was the Australian utilities learning from this partnership? So Kate,
sure.
Maybe the first one would be what were the key factors, and then for success of such kind of partnership, and then if you can just touch upon my questions as well. Thank you.
Sure, thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, Elma. So I'll just start with the key factors for success. So I think there was probably multiple, but I'll touch on three. I think the first was around developing strong partnerships on both a people-to-people level and organisation-to-organisation level between the Indonesian and Australian water utility twins, and building these based on a real level of friendship and trust. These partnerships were formed face-to-face in 2019, and I think that was certainly a key success factor, that those partnerships have been established face-to-face before the pivot to online delivery of the program during the pandemic. I'd say the second was ensuring that the Indonesian and Australian water utilities and the twins that were partnered together were co-creating what the action plans were for the program, so that they were really involved from the start, and it was based on need and opportunity, and that the delivery of these action plans were based on outcomes rather than activities. And I think that was probably key when the program did need to flex to online, that it was not based on the how but on the why. And then I think the last one would be just the role of AWA and PAPAMSI as the water associations that really connected the Indonesian and Australian water sectors. And it also just provided that ability to share the information and knowledge further than the utilities that were involved in the program. And some of the webinars were able to attract 360 water utilities in Indonesia. And so I think that was a key success factor of the program. I think that's probably covered the second question around the partnerships as well. So in terms of the Australian utilities, I think they really learned that there's so many common challenges and problems being faced by water utilities in both countries, and that by working together and sharing learnings, improvements can be made across all organisations. And so, it was really great learning, and we hope to continue this in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kate. So now questions for Donna. So maybe I'll just quickly, go through them. So what are the limits? What were the limits that you encountered during implementation of your contactless system? And then what percentage of people you found that they have bank account? And what are the largest barriers to water districts adopting new technologies given the significant benefit? And what was your in this system? And collection, and then what was how was the collection efficiency? Donna, can you just
yes,
those questions?
Yes, thanks, Emma.
Yes.
Right. So based on experience upon implementation of this technology in the water utility companies here in the Philippines, actually the main challenge, I'll probably answer the first and the last question in one answer. As a challenge, the major challenge that we actually encounter during the implementation of this program or technology is the mindset of the users, actual users or end users of the water district or of the program. They are quite hesitant to use or to adopt digital technology when it comes to transferring their current system from the usual or traditional manual system that they have been using for quite a long period of time, probably since time immemorial. So they're quite actually hesitant to adopt high technologies, digitizations, computerizations, and automated systems. So that's the first one. When it comes to the efficiency of this system, based on percentage, probably particularly on the contactless payments, especially during the pandemic for the past 2 years, most of the people paying customers in the water district that has been using our system are using the contactless payment because obviously the protocols in the pandemic, particularly during the earliest part of COVID-19, we're not really allowed here in the Philippines to do face-to-face transactions. So mostly all of the customers really diverted to contactless payment to when it comes to paying their water utility bills. And I think I already did answer all of the questions, or did I
think you have answered all the questions. Thank you, Donna. There is a question. There is a question from Andy City. Maybe if you can clarify it, I'll read out the question, but it would be good to have clarification from about it. It's like, what program includes strategies within the framework of water distribution, particularly in the area with very lack or limited access of clean water? Any presenters can answer, but maybe if you need further clarification from Andy City, I would request, yes, maybe Andy City to maybe clarify a bit about the question. Yes, so, and maybe we can just, while we wait for him, let's go to a question which is for John. What are your experiences and thoughts on different sanitation system, like centralized sewer or on-site sanitation in terms of sampling strategy and wastewater septage matrix and interpretation of results? In fact, I also had the same questions. So yes, John. Yes.
Yeah, there's absolutely no doubt that this technique is easiest in areas where there is significant sewage infrastructure already, where you have a wastewater treatment plant, you have collection systems that are clearly separating different areas in a community. So what we've seen is that there are more programs implemented in larger cities with this infrastructure, which I suppose makes sense, but it does leave out a significant number of folks who are not tied into those systems. But in certain cases, what we found, particular with our work with the Louisiana Department of Health, is that there are, I think they're at something like 50% sewered throughout the state, maybe a little bit more. But there are certain buildings, congregate living facilities with populations that are more at risk for the COVID-19 pandemic, where their buildings are tied into to septic systems, but we're able to identify certain cleanouts in manholes prior to the distribution out into a leach field, where we're able to collect valuable data from those locations. And actually, we've had some really cool case studies where we have identified COVID in those areas in the wastewater prior to the staff of those facilities being able to know that there was actually COVID being distributed in the population. So they were able to get testing resources with that information, and were able to stop outbreaks. So it is definitely doable in areas outside of the traditional infrastructure typically seen in cities, but it's just marked with a little more unique challenges, a little bit more effort on the field aspect and understanding where those where the sewage goes.
Thank you. Just my last, just to my understanding, have you tried it on septage? Does it work? Because septage is really old. So could you detect the virus in the septage as well? Have you tried it? Or maybe it's a different process that you would look at septage.
Yeah, we have not. We are typically looking at
sewage.
Yes. We've done it in areas where, like I said, in areas that are not connected to conventional infrastructure, but we have not looked at septage particularly. There could be some serious concerns with those data. Like you said, the septage being old could mean that the virus breaks down. What you're looking at is not recent virus, if it even is there in the first place. And then also septage is a matrix that is a little bit difficult to deal with in the lab. I'm sure Arthur could talk about that as well, but yeah, that's our experience.
Thank you, John. Yes, thank you, John. And then we are almost at the end of our session. I would like to thank all of you for participating in the session. Maybe just few takeaway points before I conclude this session. One is we learned a lot about this early detection and surveillance system. We can work more on how this system can be utilized in different parts of the countries, different parts of the world, and especially Asia, where we have sewerage as well as on-site sanitation system, and the huge number of population we have in Asia. And if it works, if this kind of system works in this part of the world, that would really help all the government as well as the community people a lot, and save a lot of lives and resources. And then for the contactless billing system, I think it's really a very good initiative, but we need to look more on the customer as well, how to train the customers as well as the providers to utilize this kind of system more, considering the change of our sector, and because of the COVID and others, the different types of situation that we are facing. I think this would be this can be a very useful tool. And water operators partnership, from ADB's perspective, we have been using it a lot, and we find this kind of tool really useful in for both the partners, and we would like to utilize more. And in different urban projects, it's through urban projects and TA, ADB has been supporting this kind of initiative, and we would like to do it more. Lastly, for SIDA, what Ramon mentioned, which is really important, is like climate resilience should be looked at the beginning of the project design, and should be should be an integrated part of the solution. And if we can do that, if it would result to a better project design, which also help the implementation of the project. So this is also an important area that Ramon was touching up. And I think from like my perspective, as I have been involved in project design and implementation, I think this is how the projects should be now. It cannot be an add-on solution. And lastly, I would say that CDIA is a good tool to conduct feasibility study, and which ADB has been doing for some time. So these are few takeaway points that I thought just to share with you. And thank you for your time and attending the session, and hope to see you sometime. Yes, and bye. And thank you for all your nice questions also. And also I would like to thank the presenters as well to have this have this nice presentation, and also replying those questions, and from which we also learned a lot. Thank you all.